Hi guys! Canon so far have only released full frame RF bodies, but things might start to change with the latest rumours surrounding the Canon EOS R7, Canon's very first APS-C RF body. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in Camera Rumours. And I'm going to start right now. Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to be talking about a possible brand new camera from Canon going to be released in this year, 2021. Now, Canon had an amazing year last year. They released the Canon R5 and they released the Canon R6. Both truly amazing cameras, but both of them were full frame and both of them were quite expensive. So what I think Canon are going to do this year is something slightly different. I think they're going to release a more budget orientated camera for sports, wildlife and videographers out there. And I think this camera is going to be called the Canon EOS R7. So today we're going to be talking more about this possible camera being released this year, possible specs, also pricing, but also when are we going to be expecting this camera. So without out the way guys, let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is what this camera is going to look like. So overall, I personally think this camera is going to look very similar to the Canon EOS R6. A lot of people really liked the design of the R6. It removed a lot of the things that a lot of people didn't like from the Canon R, such as this kind of touch bar at the top. A lot of people didn't get on with that. So they removed it with the dial that you can get from the Canon 5D Mark IV, which a lot of people did like. And it's the same with the D-pad at the bottom. I think they're going to be replacing that again, like they did with the Canon EOS R6, with that really handy control wheel. So little things that I think that Canon have done with the Canon R6 are going to be copied over with this new Canon EOS R7. The only difference I can see is it's obviously a full frame camera, where the Canon EOS R7 is going to be an APS-C camera. But apart from that, I think the screen, I think the EVF, I also think where all the buttons are and the actual weatherproofing are all going to be very similar, apart from the big difference, the sensor. So another thing I think this camera is going to have is to have the LP-E6NH battery. This is the same battery that you can find in the brand new Canon R5 and Canon R6, which is actually identical size battery to a lot of the older batteries, such as the LP-E6 battery, which you can find in the 7D Mark II, the 90D, or even the 5D Mark IV. So if you've had any of those older batteries, you're going to be able to use it in this brand new camera, as well as owning a brand new battery, which is a lot more powerful, which gives you a lot more battery life, which is perfect for these new mirrorless cameras. Now, another thing I am really hoping for is to actually have dual SD cards. You won't know how difficult it is to have a compact flash and an SD card, or a CFast Express and an SD card, instead of just having two. Sharing it with a friend or even using on your computer, having just two SD cards is so much more handy than having two different types of card formats. So I'm really hoping this camera has two SD cards instead of two different types of card formats. Now, talking about the sensor, this is going to be a brand new sensor from Canon. It's going to be a brand new APS-C style sensor for their RF mount. Now, the RF mount is the new mirrorless mount from Canon. So far, Canon have released all of the EF mounts, so that is all of the cameras with a DSLR, but because this is a new mirrorless system, they've had to kind of reinvent the mount. So this is going to be Canon's very first APS-C RF mount. Now, this particular sensor is going to be 1.6 times smaller than their full frame counterparts, aka the name APS-C. So this is going to be great for all you wildlife and sport photographers out there. Now, I think this camera is going to be a roughly 30 to 35 megapixels. So we'll put it slightly above the Canon R, but a little bit lower than the Canon EOS R6, kind of in the middle between the lineup at the moment, which shows Canon R, R6, and then you've got the R5, which is the very high megapixels. So I personally think this is going to be roughly in the middle between 30 to 35, something similar to the Canon 90D, which is Canon's current APS-C camera. So what other things are going to be new with this camera? Well, I think there's going to be quite a few new accessories and design twerks from the Canon R5 and R6. Most importantly is going to be the EVF, but also the back screen. Because this camera is going to be more budget orientated, I don't think the resolution is going to be as high, especially regarding the EVF. Now, at the moment, the Canon R6 has got one of the higher resolution EVFs out there at the moment. So if we have a look, it's got a 3.69 million dot viewfinder. And obviously, because of the Canon R5 is a higher resolution, it's got a set 5.76 million dot EVF. So I personally think that the Canon R7 is going to have somewhere between 2 to 3 million, possibly at the lower resolution, simply to keep the budget as low as possible. And I would also say the same with the back screen. I personally think that the actual LCD screen is going to be a lower resolution, or it's still going to have this really cool flip out, because a lot of people really like the flip out design, and I think it's not something that Canon are necessarily going to ditch with this particular new camera. So let's talk about the video quality of this camera. Now, I think this is going to be very similar to the Canon EOS R6, but instead of it being full frame, it's going to be APS-C size. So you are going to have to crop all of your images by 1.6. So at the moment, the Canon EOS R6 films 4K and 1080p, both at 30, 60 and 24 frames. But I think the main difference between these two cameras is one is going to film C-Log and the other one isn't. Because the Canon EOS R6 is a more expensive camera and designed for more professionals, I would expect this camera to have C-Log, which it does. But I think the Canon EOS R7, to make sure that it's priced correctly and it's a lot lower than the Canon EOS R6, I think this is going to have without C-Log, but still film all of the same video quality as the Canon EOS R6. So apart from C-Log, I think these cameras are going to be very, very similar in that regard. So let's talk about lenses. Now, this is a really big thing when it comes to full frame versus APS-C. Usually Canon create an EF line, or in this case, an RF line for their full frame bodies, because obviously a larger sensor is going to need a larger lens. But because these sensors are usually smaller, you can get away with smaller sized lenses. And because they're smaller, they're usually cheaper as well. Now, at the moment, Canon have only released RF lenses, and they're designed for full frame cameras. So if they are going to be releasing a lens, I would expect maybe at the end of this year, possibly at the start of next year, they're going to start release RF-S lenses, very similar to the EF-S lenses that exist currently, but again, designed for their RF mount, which is obviously a mirrorless mount. So obviously they're probably going to be releasing the converter to convert from EF to RF, but I don't think they're going to be releasing, especially straight out the gate, any designed APS-C lenses for this new body. So if you are after a kit, the only kit I think that's going to be out there currently is going to be the 24-105 f4 to 7.1 kit lens that comes currently with the EOS R6. I don't think Canon are going to be releasing any lenses this year, but I would expect a lens next year designed specifically for the Canon EOS R7 with its APS-C sized sensor. So how much is this camera going to be, and when can you purchase one? Well, I think this camera is going to be cheaper than the current Canon EOS R6, but not as expensive as the Canon EOS RP, which again is a more budget-orientated full-frame camera, and the Canon EOS R6 is more of a professional camera designed for both photographers and videographers. So at the moment, I personally think this is going to range in between possibly 1,699 to 2,199. Now, obviously it depends where you are, depending on what currency, but in pounds, I think it's going to be roughly this. And it's the same with US dollars. So I think they're going to place it roughly where the 90D sits, but possibly a little bit more, simply because of the new RF body releases a whole new and a great selection of lenses. So if you are after a more budget-orientated R6, the Canon EOS R7 is going to be perfect for you. But when can we expect this camera? Well, at the moment, I'm not expecting this camera anytime soon. If you are wanting to purchase this camera, I think it's going to be in the second half of 2021. So I'm filming this in February, so I'm thinking maybe another 6 to 7 months before this camera actually gets released. Sometime in the summer is probably going to be preferred, especially if we're getting out of lockdown or roughly that time. A lot of people are going to be buying cameras, especially if they're able to go outside. So at the moment, I personally think it's going to be June, July, August time, but it could change. Really does depend on what Canon when they want to be releasing cameras. If we look at last year, they released their cameras in the summertime, but because they released limited quantities, they were very difficult to get hold of. So if you are after this camera, I would definitely pre-order it as soon as this particular camera arrives. Brilliant, and there we go guys. So there are the current rumours and leaks surrounding this brand new APS-C camera, the Canon EOS R7. I must say I am really looking forward to this camera because I really liked the Canon R5 and R6, but they were just really expensive and out of budget for myself and most other photographers. So having a more budget orientated APS-C sized RF camera is going to be amazing, especially if you're interested in wildlife or sports photography, or you're more wanting to get interested in videographing without necessarily having a huge budget, such as the Canon EOS R6. Again guys, if you want to like, comment and subscribe to my channel, it really does help my channel grow. Also, if you want to hit the bell notification so you don't miss any of my latest content. But until next time guys, keep creating.